Welcome back to the Winter Growers Podcast. Today, my guest is Patty Gentry of Early Girl Farm, located in the town of Brookhaven on Long Island, New York. Patty has been described as the Picasso of Vegetables, and she is featured in a documentary film titled The Soul of a Farmer that follows her farming journey and takes an honest and raw look at the challenges facing small-scale farmers today. As a former chef, Patty loves and understands vegetables, and she's passionate about quality and taste and supplying her customers with beautiful produce year-round. Growing on 2 acres, she sells to 7 restaurants and a 150-member CSA, and she dreams of one day opening a little cafe, garden market, bookstore, and gathering place for all things related to growing, where she could have a bite to eat, purchase goods to take home, buy a book on seed starting, and take a class from an expert all in the same place. I really love speaking with Patty. She is a passionate and curious learner who offers so much warmth, humor, and thoughtfulness to our conversation. Today's episode of the Winter Growers Podcast is brought to you by Tunnel Vision Hoops. Tunnel Vision Hoops designs and manufactures do-it-yourself high tunnels, hoop houses, and greenhouses. With an extensive array of products to help large and small growers become more productive, they have 11 different tunnel widths to fit any application and designs to stand up to weather conditions from coast to coast. Tunnel Vision is also a national distributor of parts and accessories needed to build, maintain, or upgrade an existing tunnel or hoop house. Check out their Tunnel Vision Hoops YouTube channel for instructional how-to videos to help build a great high tunnel or hoop house. Here at Four Season Farm, we have 2 movable high tunnels made by Tunnel Vision Hoops, and they are definitely my favorites. To learn more, visit their website at tunnelvisionhoops.com. Today's show is also brought to you by Growing for Market magazine. Which crops will pay back your investment in a hoop house or greenhouse? How does managing a greenhouse through the winter differ from summer growing? And which crops can just be overwintered in the field? Learn all that and more by subscribing to Growing for Market magazine. The writers are farmers, not journalists. They won't tell you how to grow, they'll tell you how they grow, so you can decide what works for your farm. Growing for Market is celebrating 30 years of helping local food and flower growers succeed with articles written by experienced farmers from around North America. Since 1992, Growing for Market is by farmers, for farmers. Plus, subscriptions start at only $30 per year. Whether you do farmers markets, local wholesaling, a CSA, or dream of starting a farm, check them out today at growingformarket.com. Request a free sample print or digital copy from their website, and podcast listeners can get a new subscriber discount of 25% off with the code WINTER when subscribing at growingformarket.com. I think Growing for Market magazine is an excellent and affordable resource for any grower. Now, back to the show. So welcome, Patty. I am super excited to have you here today because I first learned about you through Roger Sherman, who is a filmmaker, and he did a short film called The Soul of a Farmer about you and your farming story. And what I loved about that film is he was really good at being honest and, taking a kind of a critical look at what it meant to be a small-scale farmer. And he didn't romanticize it too much. And I really appreciated your honesty and openness to tell the truth about your experience. And I'm curious, what was that like for you?
Thank you for having me on your show, by the way. The experience with Roger, he's a friend of mine. And so when he came up with the idea, he came up to me one day and he was like, I have a great idea. And I said, what is it? He's like, let's do a documentary about the farm. And I thought, oh, what? And I said, what about there's other great farms out here, Amber Waves or Balsam Farm, and maybe they'll want to do it, And I tried to talk him out of it. And he said, I think that you have a way of articulating your experience that could be helpful to other people. And then I said, okay, and so he's a friend of mine. So to have him in our intimate space was easy. And there were days when we were very busy and he would just kind of like pop up and unplanned to the farm and say, I'm going to come by in a few hours and film you. And I'd be like, oh God, we have so much to do. And he would say, here, put on your speaker. And I'd be like, oh man. And then he'd say, what are you doing? And he's so charming. I would find myself going, well, and I would go into detail and, and be just have a very natural flow with him. So for me, what I thought would be a painful process was actually very joyful because I got to be with a good friend. And I was kind of dreading seeing the film. He's like, it's ready. And so my wife and I watched it with he and his wife on the computer. And when I saw it, I cried. I was very grateful that he took the time to do that because, I mean, I feel that it's as you say, it's, very honest, kind of raw little piece of time, which I know that I'll be happy to have as years go by to reflect on that. And so, yeah, it was a great experience.
Yeah, no, it's really well done. And it came out, was it 2020 or last year? What year did it come out?
It just came out. It just came out this past summer.
Okay. Yeah. And where can listeners go and find it if they're curious to check it out?
You can watch it on iTunes or Vimeo.
Okay, great. Yeah. Well, it's really a great piece. And, yeah, I like I said, I think it's so great to actually see that honesty and rawness, and you were so good at it. So,
gosh,
and not only that, but you have like this really beautiful way of, like you said, articulating your experience in the moment, and especially when you're like so busy with 100 million things, you were really good at sort of finding this presence of mind to describe what you were feeling and experiencing. And it came across really well. So
thank you. I mean, I feel that like farmers, like I'm sure you feel this way too, when someone asks you what you're doing and you're happy to tell them. It's like you're happy to, I always tell the people that work with me, if I can save you some of the suffering I've experienced through just not knowing, then I'm so happy to do that. And I feel like there's this thing with farmers where they want to share. If something works for them, if something makes their life easier, they talk about it, they share it, they write a book about it. And I love that about the farming community. And I'm so grateful because I would not have the success I have unless it was for the myriad of teachers that I've had. And thank God, I was telling you before we started this conversation, I'm reading Jesse Frost's book on no-till. And I think, thank God he took the time to write this, and give the rest of us a chance to have the same kind of success that he's had, and look at what you're doing, a podcast in the middle of the million things you have to do. But thank God, because it gives people a chance to find another way of doing things or be comforted by someone else's experience. So that's a nice thing about the farming community for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. No, thank you. Thank you for that. So your farm, Early Girl Farm, is located in New York on Long Island.
Yeah.
And I'd love to hear a little bit more about your background, your backstory, how you got there, how you got into farming.
Well, I was a professional cook, a chef for like 25 years. And I was living in Brooklyn, and I joined something called the Park Slope Food Co-op, where they got like all these, locally grown vegetables, artisanal dairy products, and grass-fed meats, and free-range chicken eggs. And I kind of cut my teeth in the cooking industry before farm to table was a thing that it is now. And, so I started to eat these things that I was buying at the Park Slope Food Co-op. And as a chef, the things that were making me feel better, I wanted to share with the masses, and I was working at a wonderful place, but they didn't want to really like commit themselves financially to introducing those types of products to the menu. So it kind of made me curious, like, well, why is this food more expensive? What goes into growing it? And I sold my shares. I was a partner in this business back to my partners. And with that money, I kind of treated myself to an education in farming. So I went and I did an internship at a farm called Eco Farm, East End Organic Community Garden out in East Hampton, Long Island. And that's how I started farming. I was an intern there. I like rented someone's tool shed that they said was a studio. I was happy to get it. And I'll never forget, like the very first thing I transplanted was red Russian kale. And I was like out in the field, and it was like the end of a spring day, and like something just clicked in me. I love the work of farming. I love the challenge of it. And at the end of my internship, the farmer, a lovely man named Paul Hamilton, gave me an Earthway cedar as a gift. And he said, "You're going to be a farmer one day." And at the time, I was like planning on going back into the restaurant business. And I thought, what a nice thought. And that's what I ended up doing. Down the line, I got a job at a place in East Hampton called the Ross School, ROSS. It's a private school out there. I was a cook, and I had the summers off since it was a school. So I leased 1 acre, and that's what I did. In the summer, I worked 1 acre by myself. And within 2 seasons, I was able to match my salary at the Ross School. And a friend of mine had a paperweight on her desk that said, "What would you do if you knew you could not fail?" And I thought, I would be a farmer. So I thought, I'm going to do this. And so about, I think it's 11 or 12 years ago now, I leased my first acre, like closer to home, and I became a full-time farmer. So that's how I got into it.
And where did you grow up? Like, what were your childhood influences? I'm always so curious of like how people, the trajectory that they follow to get to farming.
I grew up on Long Island, and my father is in the boat business. And so we are always out on the water. And I love the ocean, and I always loved the nature of Long Island. Like when I was little, I used to just go escape to the shore, to the beach. I would go for long, long walks on the beach. And I always loved the nature here. And my parents did have a little garden when I was young, and they used to grow zucchini, and we kept like ducks and chickens. And my brother and I had a little farm stand that we would like put on the corner of our house. But I really got into food and cooking. My parents actually separated when I was young, and it was very stressful. And I found that cooking really soothed me. And I remember like through that ordeal, as our lives were changing, that I would just go make dinner. And that was my way of like dealing with stress. I remember like getting a book on napkin folding, and I would like frost all of our glasses in the freezer. And my parents were very much involved with, adult matters that took up their time. So they weren't telling me like, don't use Grand Marnier to like flame chicken, and don't hold a knife. So I kind of was like, their distraction like gave me free reign in the kitchen. And so working with my hands and having something as sensual and textile as food is something that's always just, I don't know, takes me away from everything. And I think like sharing food, that's always been my comfort zone too. Like when I went away to college, if I was in a new situation, like going to a person's house for the first time, I would always say, what can I do to help? And it was my way of kind of like getting out of like standing around socializing and like going into the kitchen. Like that was my comfort zone, and I would help prepare things and get in there. And I love the relationships that I made working with people. And I just love food. So I feel like farming is just a natural extension of that. And I always tell people, if you like to eat, than you can farm, because you have in your mind a flavor that you want. You know what you want a zucchini to taste like. You know what you want a cucumber to taste like. And I feel like having a flavor goal in your brain, it like inspires you to create that flavor in the field, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Like, so how do you think your experiences as a cook or a chef have informed your farming? You know, having that background. How do you think it's helped? How do you think it's maybe hurt the process? Or maybe not, but has it? Have you noticed specifics of that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I feel like, you know, the restaurant business is like boot camp. You're on your feet, you're constantly moving, and you're dealing with stressful situations that arise, and you have this like problem solving, like, oh my God, so and so dropped their salmon entree on the floor. What do we do?
Mm.
And, you know, it's like that's thinking in the moment type of a thing. And, you know, just the long days and the heat. And I do think that that like translates into farming. And my wife is always telling me, you got to find people that are professional restaurant people to like become farmers, because they have that like ethos. They have that like, uh, you know, the ability to work those types of days. And so I feel that, you know, just on a physical level, cooking and farming are very similar. And I started my business by serving people that I worked with and for. So as I got into farming, it was wonderful for me, because I'd say, I'm growing vegetables. And they'd say, great, we'll take whatever you have. Like I was working at the Ross School. And so I was very lucky. They bought everything I grew. And the cooks were so psyched that I was farming. And so, you know how it is, like on a cloudy day, you don't have to worry about plants in the greenhouse in the springtime. But when the sun comes out, everything changes in minutes. It goes from 50 degrees to 90 degrees. And this kitchen that I worked in had these big windows. And when I first started farming, when the sun came out, all the cooks would go, 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 and they would cover me. And this acre that I leased was down the street, and I would like drive over there and water and vent the greenhouse and come back to the kitchen. And so I think, like, you know, and plus as a person that worked in the restaurant business, I would receive vegetables all the time. And so, you know, you would be very busy and you wouldn't always have a chance to like check through the order each box. And like, let's just say you got a box of greens and the top layer looks good. And then as you're unpacking it, it's yellow and wilted at the bottom. Or like the first layer of eggplants looks great, and then underneath it, they look like crap. And then you have to go through that whole process of like sending them back or getting a credit. And I thought, when I deliver to the restaurants, I want it to be pristine. Everything I deliver, I want those chefs to know that they never have to go through what we've sent them. I want to take all of that labor out for them. So it makes me very sensitive to people's experience of receiving vegetables, because I want it to be all pleasure and no pain, you know?
Yeah, definitely. No, I think that's important. I mean, you have such a unique perspective, you know, coming from that world. I'm wondering though, do you think you've been able to also change, you know, perceptions of the chefs that you work with because of that, you know, connection that you have? Like
Yes.
pricing, like, you know, like quality. I mean, all those things are so complicated and difficult to know or understand unless you're doing it yourself. So I'm curious if you've been able to help, you know, chefs really understand that better.
Yes, I think that I think it goes both ways. I think they want me to succeed, and I want them to succeed. And you know, so it is. Pricing is always very difficult, but I Baldor is like one of the big names in vegetable delivery in New York. And so, and now they're starting to buy from local farms. And I have access to their website, and I can see their prices. And the nice thing is that like all the locally sourced small farmers they're charging premium prices. So I think that people's understanding of the value of something that is grown with integrity is definitely changing. You know, there was a time where you go on Baldor and it'd be like a 50-pound bag of onions is like $12. And I charge $3 a pound for Rose Tropia onions. I mean, how could I compete with that?
Yeah.
You know? And so I feel that in general, things are really changing for the better. And, you know, it's tempting to go, what are you charging? What are you charging to the other farmers around to see like, you know, oh my God, this person's only charging $2 a pound for tomatoes. But I feel like I devalue the whole system when I lower my prices, you know, to try to compete with people selling for less. I feel like I can start a trend for the better to keep my prices higher. And then it benefits everybody. It benefits all the other farmers. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
If I start to sell things for 50 cents a pound, then it hurts everybody around me. But if people get used to paying like $2 a pound for zucchini, then I feel like it just starts a trend for the better that benefits everybody. Plus, New York State minimum wage has gone up to $15 an hour, you know? So I just kind of feel that it's really important. It's so challenging to, especially if you have a bumper crop of something, you know, to give it away. And a friend of mine, Ian Piedmont of Balsam Farms in East Hampton, said to me, be careful lowering your price because you don't necessarily sell more. And it's true. I felt the sting of that a few times where I'm like, you know, buy 25 pounds of tomatoes and get 20% off your order, 25 pounds or more. And it's like, okay, give me 20 pounds or give me 10 pounds. Or I didn't necessarily sell 200 pounds because I lowered the price.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that the chefs definitely, it gives them much more sensitivity to know you and to know what goes into work to growing their produce. And I think that they start to invest more in small farms when they're closer to the process.
Yeah. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about your farm and the unique relationship you have with a lease arrangement with your landlady. Just describe a little bit more about that setup and, you know, benefits, challenges, anything you want to tell us about that.
Sure. Well, this particular piece of property it's 28 acres altogether. And my landlady was originally going to clear 8 acres. It was a forest that had grown up through the foundation of buildings it was a training barracks for the Army in the 1920s. So now, you know, cut to, I guess, 2000 and I don't know when I was there, 17. And, you know, almost 100 years later, and a forest has like grown up through the foundations of these buildings. So it was amazing when she started to clear the property. First of all, it was completely traumatic. And she went around and like saved all the specimen trees. And then there was a lot of like bittersweet and vines and, you know, young oak and all of this like kind of like wild growth that she cleared. But boy, oh boy, I mean, we're starting to know more and more about how interconnected everything is, the trees, the cities of mycorrhizae, how everything's talking to each other and connected. And like, it would have been even more difficult had I read Hidden Life of Trees before we started to clear this property, because it was so traumatic. So we were going to do 8 acres. We ended up doing 3. And, you know, the trees were cut and the roots were pulled out. And thankfully, my landlady had the foresight to chip and save all the trees, all the roots, all the topsoil. I mean, there was like, I would say almost a foot of humus that had built up through almost 100 years of the trees just dropping their leaves and rotting. And we disrupted all of that. And so the acreage that I lease, I was like a trauma patient, Zero organic matter. All the minerals were missing, all the major players like calcium, potassium, phosphorus, and of course, all the trace minerals, which is something that we still continue to build little by little. So, I think like leasing, that's the only thing I've ever done here on Long Island. It's really hard to buy land. Like we're out in the Hamptons area, which is like, it used to be farmland, but little by little, the farmland has been sold off for people to make these gorgeous homes in this gorgeous, gorgeous area. So buying an acre of land is kind of out of the question for me. So I've always leased. And I always look at it as like it's my obligation and my pleasure as a farmer to leave land better than I found it. And so I always work a piece of land as if I'm going to be there forever. And even if I'm not, and my experience as a farmer here on Long Island, I've had 3 different plots of land. And this particular plot of land that I'm on now, I have a 20-year lease with a 20-year option. And my landlady loves to say, she's from Italy. She's like, you'll be dead before your lease is up. Yesterday I saw her. She was like, well, just put your body in the compost. It'll be, amazing. So, and, for me, that's huge because, what choice do you have? Especially when you farm in a regenerative, organic way. It's all about building organic matter, slowly building mineral supplies, building life, bringing life back to the soil. And there's no way to do that like in a way that you can take it with you. So you leave it for the next person, even if that next person is just wild growth and nature, better than you found it. So I comfort myself with the leasing situation by saying like, this is what I do. It works better for me while I'm here, and it works better for the planet when I leave it,
Yeah. And I heard that your landlady describes you as the Picasso of vegetables.
Yes.
Which is a great title. I mean, it makes me think of like kind of both the beauty and the craziness, that is inherent in growing vegetables. And I'm curious how you got that title.
Well, my landlady is Isabella Rossellini, who is a famous actress and model and a magnificent human being. She really is. I was very nervous, actually, when I was looking for land because my wife in particular was like obsessed with living in this one part of Long Island. And I thought, all right, like if we're going to move here, then I want to find land closer to home. And I asked the realtor who was helping us, do you know of any land around here? And I saw like abandoned lots, and like that's the way I've done it from the beginning. I'm like, oh, there's a weed pit with a broken down building. Like I could farm that, And the realtor got back to me and said, you're never going to believe this. Isabella Rossellini just bought 28 acres and she's looking for someone to farm it. And here's her cell phone number. And like, I grew up like watching Blue Velvet and seeing her on the cover of Vogue magazine. So I was like, what? When I called her, like my heart was beating. And she is just the most down to earth, wonderful person with a sense of adventure. I mean, I met her. I have a picture of the two of us standing in the middle of this field, like surrounded by wild growth and taking soil samples, and she is fearless and she loves nature. So, and I mean, she sees me as the Picasso of vegetables, I guess, because, it is in a way you're kind of like a mad scientist, like I didn't study biology or chemistry, yet I find myself talking about molybdenum deficiencies and, and cobalt and, manganese. That's a really hard one to amend, and just the process of photosynthesis and what goes into it, what minerals are responsible for it. How do I get it to the plant in solid form, in liquid form? And I talk about these things, like part of my process is like saying it out loud. And so Isabella is a willing audience to talk about like how I'm going to amend the potassium deficiency and what a drag after adding all this organic matter, and the tests came back. And of course, because look at the Mexican bean leaf beetle infestation, it's pointing to, and she's like all on board to hear all of it. And so she's been a part of the process and knows very intimately what it has taken to go from 0% organic matter to 6% organic matter. And so that's how I got my name. To her, farming is art. Everything is art to her. Everything is a way for a human being to express themselves. And I don't know. And that's it. The world is your canvas. That's how she looks at it. So,
yeah. Well, it's a great name. So I love it.
Thank you.
So I'd love to hear too a little bit more of kind of the infrastructure you have, high tunnels, and then kind of what your cropping system would look like through the seasons.
Well, as you know, greenhouses are a major investment. I have one 15 by 50 heated greenhouse, and then I have a 30 by 96 foot cold frame. And I have another like 15 by 50 cold frame.
And when you say cold frame, are you referring to kind of low tunnels or Caterpillar?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
So when I say cold frame, I mean no heat.
Yeah, unheated.
So
right.
Like the 30 by 96 is a Gothic arch.
Oh, okay. So it's a high tunnel, but just no heat.
A high tunnel. Great. Okay, yeah. So that's a high tunnel. And then I have the low tunnel is just somebody gifted me the frames. Two different people gifted me two different types of frames, and I just put it together, and it's just amazing. To me, the thrill of what you can grow without heat is a greatest challenge of like winter growing, and learning how to use the high tunnels is an art. I look at like the 30 by 96 as like a 3-masted schooner that I'm learning how to sail. And I feel like, there's so much to learn about airflow and about watering. For example, I was so proud of our crops heading into winter, spinach and carrots and kale. And really, I feel like winter is like the king of winter vegetables, because you don't need any heat, and it just gets more and more delicious. And the spinach was so perfect. And I thought I saw a little bit of a leaf miner like scar. And I thought, okay, it's just at the entryway of the tunnel, like maybe. And it was downy mildew. That, I mean, we must have had $1,000 worth of spinach. We took so many pictures of it, and we were like, this is beautiful. And like going, I mean, and within a week, it spread. And, there's that moment where you're like, what do we do? Do we try to save it, or do we get it out of here and cut our losses? And that's what we did. And of course, like, these are the things that drive you to research. It's like downy mildew is something that continues to proliferate even after you cut the vegetable. You can't like wash it off and put it in a bag, and it continues to grow. So that's like the learning curve with these tools, and as like, why did that happen? I feel that I like watering with drip tape, but sometimes I feel that I think of soil as like one huge organism, and I like overhead watering because the entire organism is moist. And I feel that sometimes crops do better with that. And then I know that like I never had a problem with spinach ever. And so that's why I say like all of these high tunnels and low tunnels and heated greenhouses, you have to learn like the timing of the crops in there, what does best, what needs heat, what doesn't, what likes drip irrigation, where can you use overhead irrigation. So, but in general, I find those high tunnels are cash cows. Like when you learn how to use them, you can extend your season, and you can grow so much food in a small space. It's incredible. So we have those infrastructures that are plastic, and then we have altogether we farm a little bit under 2 acres. And so outside, we've really gotten into low tunnels. And I learned a lot about them from reading No-Till Intensive Vegetable Culture by Brian O'Hara. I feel like I'm always like trying to land on the sweet spot as far as like bed width is concerned, and how to cover them, how to extend the season from spring into winter, what's the best way. And I think I learned this actually from your dad, which was like the electrical conduit piping that fit over 2 30-inch beds with like a foot walking space in between.
Mm-hmm.
But I since changed the infrastructure in the field to 30-inch beds with 18-inch walking paths.
Mm-hmm.
And I use now that like coiled wire. And I find it's a lot easier to work with than the big electrical conduit piping. And I like breaking up the beds into smaller units. And so this year, we tried this system that was suggested by Brian O'Hara, where we use the wire and perforated plastic, which was amazing. In the springtime for pepper and eggplant and all of that. Pepper, really, eggplant we cover with row cover because of flea beetles. But that's what it looks like. It's kind of a dance of, like most small farmers in the Northeast, spring is very greens heavy, fava beans and English peas and sugar snaps, and then into all the beautiful summer crops, zucchini, pepper, eggplant. The tunnels we use for tomatoes in the summertime. I do determinate varieties of beefsteaks, and I do cherry tomatoes, 2 rows of those. I started very ambitiously with the lower and lean system, doing 5 96-foot rows in a 30 by 96 greenhouse. What a nightmare. I mean, just pruning them. One night I thought, let me just lay down on these tomato leaves for 1 minute. And I fell asleep in the greenhouse with clippers in my hands. So now I know what we can realistically take care of. And that's like 2 90-foot rows of cherry tomatoes with that lower and lean system, which I learned from Ben Hartman at Clay Bottom Farm. He wrote The Lean Farmer, and that book was really instrumental in my leaning up my techniques. And also Connor Crickmore at Neversink Farm he's another one that's a master of how to max out an acre, So that's what we do through the use of the wire, the perforated plastic, and row cover. We start very early in spring and go right through summer. And the like I said, those plastic structures are used for things like basil, which has become a problem here in the Northeast. There's a basil blight that has become an issue, and it's like a mildew that forms on the bottom of the basil leaves. So growing it inside is very helpful. And the tomatoes, of course, because you can go have tomatoes early into the only thing that kills the tomatoes is us taking them out of the greenhouse. And then this year I grew ginger in the heated greenhouse. So that's what we do.
Yeah, no, that's a lot. That's a ton of diversity. You had shared with me that when you were first starting out, you were sort of thinking about crops and things to grow, you would call Johnny's and
yes.
to ask them questions. And you said that they became sort of like a therapist for you.
Yes.
Because
Johnny's, yes. Yeah. It's so true. I started ordering seeds, I think like New Year's Day. And I just wrote to them, they have a chat window at Johnny's, which is so helpful. Like, it's amazing. That company is amazing. That was the very first seed company I used, and I diversified. Of course, there's like so many beautiful seed companies out there. But Johnny's is like my first love. And now they have that chat window, which is like, I'm like a stalker. I get on there January 1st. I'm like, I just want to say Happy New Year's. And I love you guys at Johnny's. I like close the chat window. But oh my God, I mean, it's amazing. Like, for example, we have an issue with our peppers. We have a pepper maggot. And it's this fly that drills a microscopic hole into the top of the sweet pepper and lays its eggs in the seed cavity. And then there's these little maggots in there. And I don't know how to deal with it. I think this year I put diatomaceous earth. I like mixed it into a compost tea and like sprayed the diatomaceous earth thinking maybe that would help. And of course, like I asked Johnny's, I said, which varieties do you recommend? And I have an issue with pepper maggot. Like, please help me, because we've become experts at spotting which peppers have this problem. But it's so time consuming, and I love sweet peppers. It's hard. Like people say, then just don't grow it. But you want to taste it and you want to like put it in a sofrito, or I don't know, have it on a crudité, or stuff them and roast them. So not to grow something is hard because, you know, you want it even more when someone tells you shouldn't have it.
Of course.
So, of course, Johnny's got back to me. Like one of their pepper experts sent me all these documents on how to deal with the pepper maggot, which was so helpful. That's Johnny's. I mean, they're amazing.
Yeah.
You know?
No, that's great. I love that.
Yeah.
Hey, podcast listeners, we're going to pause for a moment to hear from one of our show sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Rimmel Greenhouses.
Whether it's tomatoes to market, flowers in the spring, or your family's harvest, growing in a greenhouse protected from the weather provides the right environment that you need for a harvest that you can count on. Rimmel Greenhouses are designed for durability and offer the quality that you need to grow productively year-round. Visit rimmelgreenhouses.com to get a quote today.
Here at Four Season Farm, we use Rimmel greenhouse models to support our year-round crop production. Today's show is also brought to you by Johnny's Selected Seeds. Johnny's Selected Seeds is a proud sponsor of the Winter Growers podcast. Since 1973, Johnny's has supported farmers and gardeners with superior seeds, tools, and information to help ensure their growing success and feed their communities and families. The research farm is the heart of Johnny's, where they trial thousands of varieties and tools every year. The breeding program uniquely focuses on introducing varieties that meet the needs or solve challenges that mixed market, small farmers, and avid gardeners face. Visit johnnyseeds.com for innovative new varieties and time-tested favorites to grow this season. You can also browse the online Growers Library for a wealth of educational resources, including the Johnny's Winter Growing Guide, which features tips on planting and harvesting into the shortest days of the year. The employee owners at Johnny's look forward to growing with you. Now, back to the show. So we're having this conversation in January. What do you have in the combination of low tunnels, high tunnels? What do you have growing right now? What are you harvesting?
Well, of course, kale. And like, interestingly enough, like, when I always thought of kale as like a garnish underneath a prime rib on a buffet, like that curly thing where you're like, ew, who would eat that? And when I got into farming, like the cool thing about loving to eat and then getting into farming is like, oh my God, there's 500,000 types of kale. And so at first I was like flat leaf kale. Red Russian was like my first like, oh my God, this is kale. It's so velvety and you can eat it small. You can eat it big. You can eat it raw. You can do a million things with it. But what I've learned, and this is through, I think Connor Crickmore, is the Winterboard curly kale. Now, in the wintertime, Winterboard kale is the most delicious thing. And you don't need to heat it. And as you know, from growing things in the winter, it's super sweet. So we have Winterboard kale. We have all the kind of unusual greens that you can only really grow in winter. Claytonia, which I learned about from your dad. Minutina, which I learned about from Fedco Seeds because they described eating Minutina, which is like, if you're not familiar with it, it's that like, it looks like an aloe leaf and a blade of grass had a baby, you know?
Good description.
And it tastes so in the wintertime, and it can withstand 0 degrees underneath minimal cover and come back looking gorgeous. Currently, we have it in the low tunnels with the perforated plastic and row cover over that. And it's just so sweet and delicious. And Fedco Seeds suggested a Minutina salad with a warm fried duck egg on top. I mean,
wow.
Come on. I mean, they had me at hello. I was like, I have to grow this thing. So, and mosh, which is a magnificent. I mean, I don't know why they call it corn salad, except for like, I tell people that it actually tastes like sweet corn juice. Like it has that like sweetness, and the texture is so different. It's like a velvety, succulent feeling in the mouth. So we use wintertime to grow these things that, you know, on a daily basis. Minutina, someone would think that you mowed your lawn and like tossed it in a salad bowl for them because it looks like grass. But in at this time of year, people are so willing and happy to try anything green. So Winterboard Kale, spinach, arugula, Minutina, mosh, claytonia, green onions, cilantro is like another powerhouse winter herb, which is amazing. And we would normally have some greens in our heated greenhouse, but this year I grew ginger thinking it would fly off the shelves, and it hasn't. And I must have 150 pounds of ginger still in this greenhouse. I can't believe how well it did. And as you know, it's a tropical plant, so I've been keeping it warm because I don't want to give it away. Like I asked a local person, like, what do you pay for organic ginger? And he said $3 a pound. And I was like, what? Like, you know, so I'm just thinking like, I will give it as a part of the winter CSA share. So what we do is we have a CSA of 100, and this year we had 130 members. We started with 30 3 years ago. And I was afraid to like get into a CSA because it must be my Catholic upbringing where it's like someone pays you in advance and like, what? Like, you know, now you owe them. And it's like, what if I can't produce? So I was so afraid to do a CSA. And so I started very small, and this was my landlady's idea. She said, you should do a CSA. She does eggs and honey, and people were getting that from her going, how do we get the vegetables? So I primarily serve restaurants. That's all I ever did. And then a few years back, we started a CSA, and we started very small with 30 people. And now we did 130 this year, and we're going to go for 150 in 2022. Great. So we have this built-in audience, which is amazing. And it's just so great because you know all the reasons why. You get money up front to buy things when you really need them. In the spring, you know, you start paying people before the farm really starts generating a lot of produce, and it's just an incredible thing. And we have this audience that, like, if we don't produce a winter share every week, it's fine. We have an online market, and we say, like, I had my website on Weebly, and we hooked up Square to it, and we send out an email to all of our CSA members. And so we don't need 130 winter shares. We can set a limit. We have 50. And so we send an email out, people buy it online, and then they come pick up at the farm on a Saturday. And so it's just been really wonderful because it gives us a chance to get better at winter growing without the pressure of having to produce. They're not expecting anything. So when we have it, they're very, very grateful. And we have an audience of 130 people. And, you know, if we can produce 50, 60, or even 30 bags, it doesn't matter. And they all sell out because, you know, the CSA clientele are local people. And it's a really wonderful way to start to practice and get better at producing throughout the winter.
Yeah. Yeah, and you've also been doing some value-added products. You mentioned like a green goddess dressing
Yeah.
to be available to pickups or soup CSA. What exactly inspired that?
What inspired it was I mean, if I'm being 100% honest, when I first started farming, I needed the money. I'm like, what can I do in the wintertime to make money? And I wanted it to be fun and easy. I always look at people that like thought of like who invented the ice cream sandwich, and now they're like, that's all they do is make ice cream sandwiches and they're completely successful. I'm like, I wish I thought of that. So I thought, like, I don't want to do anything difficult. So I just focused on soups. And since I have a restaurant background and people know that I have that knowledge, they're happy to try whatever we can make, you know? So I started a soup CSA where people for 6 weeks, every week, they got a different type of a soup and they could sign up for a quart or 2 quarts. And I coordinated with a local health food store. We use it as a pickup point, and it was good for them and good for me. It brought business to them in the middle of winter, and it was a place for me to have people come get the soup. And so now since we're getting better at the winter growing, which takes practice, we have a lot of the ingredients we grow ourselves for the soup. And so now we can do soup and salad. And, I find like anything value added, like as much as people love picking up their CSA vegetables, they would like it even more if we prepared everything and then put it in the bag. It's just the way it is. It's like anything that can bring something delicious and wholesome to a person that they don't have to prepare, that they trust you, they know that you're making it with the best ingredients and with their health in mind, they're on board. So that's one of the ways we try to enhance our CSA pickup. The last job I had before I became a farmer in the restaurant business, was I worked at an Indian restaurant where we made dosas. And so I always had this fantasy of like making dosas at the farm because they're easy to make and, it's fast, they're healthy, they're made from rice and white lentils, they're served with a chutney, and we make them with vegan, all vegetables from the farm, and vegan cheese if we want, and all the chutneys are made with ingredients from the farm. So people love it. And it's like just another way to kind of like sweeten the deal for people with their CSA share, So I feel like the value add the things, if you have the time to do it. And what we've been doing is I used to rely heavily, like the restaurants were the lion's share of my income. And slowly, now the CSA has become the lion's share of our income, plus the value-added products. So since we're not going out to the restaurants delivering and packing, we have more time to do things for the members of the CSA who come to us. We don't go to them. So it's a wonderful thing. I'm very grateful to Isabella, my landlady, for suggesting the CSA because it's just been such a game changer for us.
Yeah, no, it sounds like such a great combination of different skill sets that you have and ways, win-win for your customers and for you. So I was gonna ask, and you kind of answered it, how many restaurants or if any that you sell to in the winter? Are you able to supply any of them?
I do. I have the very first restaurant I ever served is a place called the Stone Creek Inn in East Quogue out here on Long Island. And the chef is a man named Christian Muir. He's French. And so I feel like his European sensibility is very helpful for a farmer because he's no stranger to mosh or minutina. He's happy to take whatever I have whenever I have it. He's very easy. So I do. And there's another local little place called Copper Beach, which the chef is incredible. She's happy to take whatever I have. So like locally, as long as a restaurant can be flexible, like I can't provide them with ingredients for a dish that they can put on their menu permanently. But if they have the flexibility to be able to do specials, then yes, I do serve the local restaurants.
Yeah. No, I think that's really important, if because, as you know, the supply is so limited in the winter. And if you have a CSA and you have that, responsibility to those individuals, having restaurants as an outlet to, as you have stuff available to sell is great, but they have to be very understanding of that situation. So,
yeah, I feel that, and the beautiful thing is more people are getting into farming. And so there's more competition, so to speak, but it's a good thing because, it creates an interest, more of an interest when there's more people doing it. And it's like, at first you're like, hopefully there's, enough business for all of us. But as it works out, it's like when I don't have something, someone else has it, or I have it when they don't. And it's like, it works out well, and, and there's enough for everybody. There's enough room in this world for more good food. There should be more of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so what's next? What are your hopes and dreams for the future of Early Girl Farm? What do you envision?
I just want to continue building on the CSA. And since we started doing the doses last year and they were received, so well, and it was something that was definitely a push to do for me because doses are a little tricky to make. And so they're hard to teach other people how to do. But towards the end of the summer, we were getting to a point where the other lovely farmers that work with me, first of all, they were like dying to try because it's this thing that you like pour out onto a hot griddle and you push the batter out quickly and it forms this paper thin crepe that's like a foot wide and a foot long. And so they're fun to make. So we made great extra income that way. So I'd like to shift more towards more prepared foods for our CSA. And so that's kind of like a dream of mine. This year, we're going to add a beverage that we make at the farm. It's going to be a lemonade that will have rhubarb from us or elderberry juice or ginger, like a ginger mint lemonade. And then I buy local fruit from this amazing fruit grower. We could do strawberry, blueberry, peach lemonade. It's like, I feel like anything that we make sells, and I want to do some cold soups in the summertime and that green goddess dressing that we were talking about. And I feel like, that's the way I'd like to go with the farm. I'd like to make it more of less going out and doing the delivering and bringing our product to people, but more of preparing things that people can come to us and buy. And I want to make the farm like the way it is with the farm. It's very intimate. Like all of the CSA members walk right down the middle of all of our growing fields. So there's nowhere to hide. Like if we have, like I was talking about, a Mexican bean leaf beetle issue on our beans, like that's all I see. I'm like, oh my God, people are going to see and they see everything, and we added you pick flowers and we've had you pick herbs since the beginning. And we actually let people go into the high tunnels and cut basil on their own without any supervision, like in amongst all the growing tomatoes. And I feel like that kind of immersive experience people crave. And people are so good. I said to my wife, you pick herbs. Like, what if somebody mows down all the time and takes it all? But people take a 2 little sprigs, it's like people are so respectful and they're so happy and they're so, they're just very aware when they're in our space. And so I'd love to we're doing more you pick flowers this year. We're doing dahlias. And we started to grow hops, and I was very lucky. A friend of mine who's in the restaurant business just yesterday hooked me up with a guy who brews beer. I'd love to make beer with the hops as also part of the CSA. And it's fun. So I'd like to start preparing and making things to kind of sweeten that CSA experience. That's the way I see the farm going into the future.
Mm. Yeah, well, it seems like a beautiful, combination of both of your strengths to bring those two together and share all that love with the people that support you. So,
yeah. It's a wonderful feeling.
Well, let's jump into the lightning round questions. Are you ready for those?
I am.
Okay. First question. This is probably a hard one, maybe. I don't know. Your favorite crop to grow, cook, and eat?
That is a hard one. Let me think about that. My favorite crop. I love sugar snap peas in the spring, but then I also love fava beans, and I also love English peas. This is a very hard question, Claire.
I didn't expect there to be one answer.
Yeah, I mean, I love sweet corn. Like, I love any plant that grows taller than me. I think it's a miracle that you can start a seed and then like walk through a crop that's surpassed you in height. It's just an amazing feeling. And watermelons. I love growing melons, even though I say I'm never going to do it, and I do it every year because it's so thrilling to that I don't know. So and this year I'm bringing back strawberries, but from seed. I'm going to do Alpine strawberries that I can have in like little corners of the farm for kids to be able to find, to pick and eat, because Alpine strawberries, you basically have to stand there and eat them because they don't last long off the vine.
Yeah, no, those are fun.
And I love starting them from seed because you have to be very ninja about like the amount of water. They need light to germinate. So I like those crops that are a challenge to get started and a challenge to grow. And I can only really grow things that I enjoy eating and preparing, because then I'm invested in that whole process. Like, some people have said to me, now that marijuana is legal, do you think you're going to grow marijuana? And I said, well, I don't really like to smoke marijuana, so I wouldn't know what I was looking for in the end product. Like if I enjoyed pot, I'd be on board with growing it because I would know what I want to feel like, what I want it to taste like.
What about edibles?
Yeah, that's true. As a matter of fact, on our website, we had a portion that said edibles, but I meant it for like the winter CSA share. And people were like, oh my God, that's so cool. You're doing edibles at the farm. So who knows? Maybe we could do that one day.
Yeah. Well, actually, I was going to say, do you have any crop that you don't like to eat?
No.
Okay. Nope. There you go. Okay. What's your favorite tool?
The first thing that popped to mind is Cobra head hoe.
Uh-huh.
I love the Cobra head. It's like, it's a gift that I give people a lot because I just think it's an amazing tool. I love how it gets into the corners. I love how fast it is. And they make a Cobra head hoe on a stick, so to speak. But I like to bend over and like get close to the plants and use a Cobra head because I feel like I can see what's going on down there. And it's so fast. It takes up big weeds. It takes up little weeds. So the Cobra head hoe for sure. But if I can add a little footnote, Connor Crickmore's dibbler has really changed our life at the farm. I never really used a dibbler. When I started farming, I was like, plant them a foot apart. And it's like, what's a foot? It's like, well, the size of your foot. Like, it was so disorganized. And I'm so sorry that I was late to the game on dibbling, because now I know exactly how far apart, exactly how many seeds for the bed. Like, it's no longer a guessing game. And for a small farm, Connor Crickmore's dibbler is amazing. It's 4-inch, 7-inch, 10-inch, and 15-inch grids. And it has...
Are you referring to the gritter? I think that's what you're referring to. The gritter. Yes. Okay.
Yes, the gritter. Oh my God. I mean, I have a picture of Connor Crickmore in my van with like a little votive candle in front of it and my wife is like, who is that? I'm like, that's Connor Crickmore, who invented the gritter. which
Well,
is
he didn't invent
amazing.
the gritter. Let me just clarify that
Okay,
a lot
please
of these
clarify.
tools, these tools have come from, long ago and have been adapted by many people. And so I think it's just important to clarify for listeners too that, tool invention it's hard to pin on any one person. So
Okay, you mean the Rolling Stones didn't invent music?
yeah, well, it's just so many minds and people have put ideas into
Of
tools,
course.
especially, my dad in particular too. And he's been so generous with giving a lot of the ideas that he's come across to other people who then go and manufacture things. So it's, a lot of the people who end up manufacturing it get the credit, but it isn't always from them.
I understand that. I mean, for me, that was that was the first dibbling tool that I ever purchased was that gritter.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's why, it comes to mind. But of course, and actually, I'd like to get the tilther that your father invented.
Yeah. And again, like he didn't really invent it, but he was part of the process of developing it. And it's just important to always know that there's so many people involved in all of these things. So,
right.
Yeah.
Yes.
But yeah, well, good. Well, I'm glad that you've got lots of favorite tools.
Yes.
So who is an inspiring farmer or land steward you'd want to have as a dinner guest, either living or deceased?
Well, Dan Kitteridge of the Bionutrient Food Association, he introduced me to all the great soil scientists and farmers. Like taking his class, I learned through a friend of mine who's a plant pathologist at Cornell that Dan Kitteridge was going to be giving an intensive course on regenerative farming at Cornell. So I signed up for it and not knowing what to expect. But Dan taught me how to read a soil test for myself. Like the reason I even know what molybdenum is because of Dan Kitteridge. And during his class, he used the word molybdenum and he went, "What?" after he said it, meaning that's what we were all thinking, like, what is molybdenum? So, Dan introduced me to the works of William Albrecht, to Dr. Maynard Murray, who, was studying how to use ocean water, which is so plentiful and highly mineralized, into farming. So I could say, I'd love to have dinner with Dr. Maynard Murray to find out more about how to easily use ocean water as a mineral input, but I would know nothing of him unless it was Dan Kitteridge. So I feel like I owe Dan Kitteridge dinner. He has completely changed farming for me. He has just empowered me to learn how to build a healthy ecosystem, healthy soil, and he sets the bar so high for quality. And so without him, I wouldn't be where I am today. So the answer is Dan Kitteridge.
Mm. What is your learning edge, and where do you feel your ability or understanding as a farmer could grow?
I feel that planning was not something I was good at. I have a lot of physical energy and desire to, grow things, but it took me a while to have Excel sheets with field layout and, instead of just going, oh, I think I need 10 pounds of bean seeds. Now I know that I need 2 pounds. So I feel that the planning, taking the time to implement systems that are exact, is something that I came to later in my career. It was just because I could work by myself for 15 hours a day and I had restaurant connections that I made it for as many years as I did. But now I'm 54 years old, and if I want this thing to go without me, I need to have systems in place that are easy to teach and are sustainable. And so I feel like that's where I am constantly trying to improve, with having systems that I can say to the young lady whose name is Katrina, who works with me, here's how I take down restaurant orders, or here's what we need in this field A, like we finally have field A, B, C, and bed lengths in each field and planting charts in each field, so I can empower other people to do what I do. And so I feel like that's the area that is something that is a place where I always need to keep honing and doing better.
Yeah. There's a great quote by writer James Clear, who wrote Atomic Habits. And he says that we do not rise to the level of our goals. We fall to the level of our systems.
Very true.
So, yep. It's good learning and practice for all of us to develop those habits and those systems that, when the shit hits the fan, we have someplace a little softer to land.
Oh, definitely. And so and you don't have waste. You don't waste product. You don't waste seeds. You don't waste time. Time is the thing that I've been hemorrhaging since I got into farming until recently. So those practices are very, very important.
Yeah. So this is the next somewhat related question. How do you relate to that which is out of your control?
I love that. It's interesting. Lately, I've been doing a lot of reading as the winter kind of provides that time. And so first I read The Fifth Agreement, which is like a follow-up to the Four Agreements. And now I'm reading something called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankel, who is a survivor of the Holocaust, who was a psychiatrist who was imprisoned in Auschwitz. And I was interested in the book because a friend of mine who is a professional psychiatrist said that Viktor Frankl quoted something like this: there's the thing that happens and there's your reaction to it. In the time in the middle is your power. How do you handle those things in life that you weren't planning on, that are out of your control? And so those things that happen, they're done. Like I always say, the milk is spilt. For example, we put in a new irrigation system with 3-inch PVC pipes at the base. And I didn't know that when you glue a PVC pipe together, you have to hold it there for minutes so the glue, because the pressure of the air in such a big pipe pushes it out of its coupling. So we get this system together, I turn it on, and the 3-inch pipe starts separating at the couplings. And, it's like, okay, like this is what's happening. And now we just have to fix it. And I feel like, one of the guys who works with me, who's awesome, but he was like, you were standing right there and you instructed us and this whole thing is exploding. And I said, well, it's nobody's, we didn't know, and so now we just have to deal with it. So that's how I feel. It's like those things that happen in life, they're happening, they happened. And now the question is, how do we deal with it? It's not personal. It's part of learning. It's part of living. That's the exciting part of living, and that just shows us who we are. And so that's what I love about farming, is its unpredictability, because we really don't have control over anything. It's an illusion control. We make our plans, we do the best we can, but things never turn out how we plan. So I just kind of deal with it,
Yeah. No, I mean, you can't know what you don't know.
Exactly.
So what's your favorite way to relax or self-care activity?
I love, my favorite thing is coffee in the morning. Like that ritual. In the winter, I have more time. But even in the summer, when I'm really busy, if I have to be at work at 6:30, I get up at 4, just so I have an hour to have a cup of coffee and read. like that's very relaxing to me. And I love movies and I love romantic comedies. Like if I'm being 100% honest,
you like rom-coms? Is that what you said?
I do. I do. As a matter of fact, like one of my joys recently is the new season of Queer Eye.
Mm-hmm.
And I watched an episode that was so beautiful the other night. I cried so much that I was exhausted and I had to go to bed. So I love it. I love good movies. Like that's definitely an escape for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you love besides farming?
I love my family and time with them. I love outdoor activities. I love the ocean. I love body surfing because we're here on Long Island. So going to the beach and getting in the ocean is one of my favorite things that I don't do enough of in the summer. So, and I love listening to music. That's huge for me. Like, and I love the new music technology because you're like listening to a song and then it's like, if you like this, you're going to like this. So that I love listening to music, and I love roller skating. I just kind of get back into that, because that's like music and exercise. Like disco roller skating is something that I think is just amazing. So, all those things, there's so many wonderful things to do, besides farming, and, but they're all kind of related. So
things that bring joy.
Yeah, exactly.
What's one piece of advice you wish you had starting out, or something you wish you had done differently?
I wish someone would have said to me, when you are negotiating a lease, like test the soil and take a good look at what you're going to be bringing back to life and negotiate maybe like 2 years rent free as you take an abandoned, depleted plot and make it a thriving ecosystem. Because I feel like you're like, oh my God, here's the piece of land. Yay, thank you. I'm so grateful. And you get into it and you're paying, even though, as typically land is not expensive. Farmland, if it's designated farmland, there are so many great organizations. We have NOFO, we have Peconic Land Trust out here. We have Post Moro, another land preservation. So when you're used to like renting a restaurant and it's like $10,000 a month, and then you hear that it's $3,000 a year for 2 or 3 acres, you're like, that's cheap. But you are usually adding compost, adding minerals, working numerous hours, taking losses in crops until the soil gets up where it can sustain, longer harvest windows and better fruits. So I feel like I wish someone would have told me that, to negotiate better on my own behalf and to understand the value that farming brings to a piece of land.
Mm. What does farming mean to your heart?
I mean, first word that comes to mind is just love. That's what it brings. There are times when I'm standing on the farm where I feel overwhelmed with joy and to just be there. And that's what it means to me. It's like a connection with this world that exists beyond words. And it's like I feel, I thank God every day that I'm able to be a farmer for a living.
Amen. How will you grow old farming?
I mean, a friend of mine whose name is Dale Halbrick, he's a farmer out here in Sag Harbor. He's in his mid-70s now, and he's still farming. And he's like, I just want to die picking string beans, And I feel like that's a beautiful thing about farming is it's a healthy activity. If you're lucky enough to have the tenacity to see yourself through the difficulties of starting it up, and you can grow a healthy business, it is a very healthy thing to do. You're outside working physically, which is so rewarding and keeps you young. It keeps you healthy. And you're growing good food that you want to eat. And, food is medicine. So, and you're growing community. So you're going to be surrounded by people that you can share experiences with that enriches your life. So I feel like I don't ever foresee a time where I'm not growing something. And I'd like to hand the farm off. I always say to the young people that work with me, you guys, this is yours. Like, when I'm no longer doing it, it's like Willy Wonka in the chocolate factory when he gives back the gobstopper and he gets the keys to the chocolate factory. I'm like, this is what I want. I mean, this is for this to be yours someday, so, and for me to continue to be involved, but to just share it with younger people that can keep it going.
That's beautiful. And then it reminds me of what you said earlier and then Isabella will put you on the compost pile.
Exactly. You'll be dead. And I will be. That's it.
Well, thank you so much, Patty. This has been a real pleasure. I love your sense of humor, your thoughtfulness, the way you think about kind of how things are connected, and the attention to quality and care that you take. Is really, really just so much wisdom in this conversation. And I sincerely hope to come see your farm one day. And I really think Roger had it right, calling the film The Soul of a Farmer. So
thank you. Thank you
You're
so
very
much,
soulful.
Clara. Thank you for taking the time and for wanting to speak to me. I really appreciate it. And as you know, your farm was the very first farm I ever learned of. And as I told you in our emails, your dad's books were the very first ones I ever read. And I actually based our system now on his system when I originally started. And so I thank you. Thank you for sharing so generously and for making a space for all of us to be comforted and to learn. And thank you for sharing your time with me.
Thank you so much. Today's show was produced by me, Clara Coleman, with support from No-Till Growers. Special thank you to Willie Breeding for the theme music. Thank you to the patrons at patreon.com/no-till growers for helping to make this show possible.